I've got a few shows coming up over the next few weeks that I'd like to tell you folks about. On November 4th and 5th, I'll be in George West, Texas at the George West Story Fest. On November 10th and 11th, I'll be in Amarillo, Texas at the Working Ranch Cowboys Association World Championship Ranch Rodeo. On November 11th, I'll be in Lubbock, Texas at the Cactus Theater with my friend Andy Wilkinson, opening for our friend and hero Ramblin' Jack Elliott. And on December 5th, I'll be in Fredericksburg, Texas, playing a fundraiser for the Western Folklife Center, along with my friends Don Edwards and Waddy Mitchell. You can find out more info about any of these shows at my website, andyhedges.com. While you're there, you can sign up for my email list so you can stay up to date with future shows and the podcast and other news. If you're interested in booking me for your event or gathering or house concert, I'd love to visit with you about that. You can send an email to andy@andyhedges.com. I'd like to start today's show with a poem written by J.B. Allen. You'll hear more about J.B. later in the show, but he was a working cowboy from Whiteface, Texas, and a fine writer of poetry. This poem is entitled The Medicine Keepers. A man might live and work beside the fellers round the wagon and never say two words, unless it's just hoorah and bragging. But sometimes in the solitude of some old line camp shack, he smooths a fruit can label out and writes there on its back a group of words redeemed from time to last when he moves on, set down with hurried flourish, for his memory of 'em's gone. The spelling may not be exact or commas where they ought, but there within those rugged lines a mood is somehow caught. It might be full of sadness from a death or crippled friend, to just the mournful yearning for a way that's bound to end. Some others could be bawdy while full of life and mirth, or stories about some saddle horse that has no peers on earth. There's many through the years been lost or burned or throwed away, but others yet survive to give us views of yesterday. And still amongst the working hands the words come now and then to write a living history of the stock and earth and men. Howdy folks, this is Andy Hedges and you're listening to Cowboy Crossroads. On each episode I interview a different guest and ask them to share stories and discuss music, poetry, and culture from the working cowboy west and beyond. My guest today is Rod Taylor. Rod is a singer and a songwriter who makes his home in Cimarron, New Mexico, where he cowboys on the Philmont Ranch. In addition to performing solo, Rod performs with a band called The Rifters. Rod was playing a gig in Lubbock and came by my house, and we sat down at my dining room table to record this interview. I should mention that the chairs we sat in were really squeaky, and for some reason my mic picked up lots of table noise and room noise that I was not able to get rid of. But in spite of that, we had a great time, and Rod told some wonderful stories. Here's Rod Taylor.
I was born and raised in Lubbock. Graduated from Monterey in '75, Monterey High School. I was a Boy Scout, and in my local scout troop, I had a real good friend, and his family owned a ranch out east of Slayton. So the name of the ranch is C-Bar Ranch. Clark Wood owned it and ran it, the Wood family. But my buddy Mike, he and I would go out there and go camping and quail hunting and duck hunting, and go fishing, and then pretty soon Clark decided we were old enough that we could work a little bit, so we, started out cleaning the barn and working on windmills, and eventually we finally graduated to where we could get a horseback and do some cow work. So yeah, that's what really sparked my interest in the whole cow business. Just being out there on the C-Bar Ranch. And that connection was, through Mike Lowry, and that's what kind of started all that for me. I knew that I wanted to be outside. Whatever it was I was going to do, it was going to have to be outside. So I loved that. That was great to be out there on the ranch, and finally to be horseback and brand calves, flank calves. It was a lot of fun, and that's really where I first got my first taste of it. After I graduated from high school, I took that next fall semester off. I had gone to Philmont up in Cimarron, New Mexico, which is a Boy Scout ranch. It's the national high adventure base for the Boy Scouts. I had gone there, I guess the summer of '74 was the first summer I worked there. Then worked there again the summer of '75. So the fall of '75 is when I should have been going to college. But instead, my buddy Matt Parsley and I went traveling. And we went up to Canada and down the West Coast and just down to the Big Bend, and just made a circle across through the West. And then the spring of '76, I went to Tech and found myself looking out the window most of the time. So that next summer then, I went back to Philmont. So then it was that next fall, I guess, whatever that would be, I was going to go to school up in Moscow, Idaho. I'd been accepted to go to school up there, and I was going to study forestry, and that was kind of the plan. But then that summer when I was working at the ranch at Philmont, I bought a saddle, and that was the end of it. Yeah. So that fall then, when I was supposed to go to school up in Idaho, instead I took a job on the Vermejo Park, the WS Ranch. And I've been cowboying ever since. So that fall, I was working out of the WS end. We were gathering all the high country, the Vividal country. So yeah, that would be the fall of '76 that I went to work there and gathering all the high country, all that high country cows down to the Cimarron area to work those cows and ship and do all that. Then I stayed on through the winter and, feeding cows, breaking ice, that thing. I can remember that fall, late in the fall, we were gathering that Vividal country, and that's right below Costilla Peak. It's, that's 9,000 feet and above. Real big country, big open parks and really long canyons, good water, good grass. Of course, there's a lot of timber too, but I remember gathering that country late in October, and it was snowing, and I was cold, and I had on a pair of kind of new boots that fit real tight, and my feet were so cold, and I thought I was going to freeze to death. but it was big country, and all day. But it was good country, really pretty country. We also gathered all the horses out of there that fall, or remuted that we were riding. And myself and two other fellows drove down those, 60 head of horses, about probably 20 miles, maybe a little more, back down to Cimarron, and, where the ranch headquarters was, the WS south end of it. But that was a fun drive for a 19-year-old kid to do that. So the Romeo Park's about 500,000 acres, and in those days there were cow camps scattered all over the ranch, and they had a camp man would have a house, and he would have his part of the ranch, his area of responsibility, that might be 20 or 30 or 40 or 50,000 acres that you're taking care of the cattle in your area. So that's checking waters and salt and fences and doctoring and keeping them home, and that whole thing. It's just like your own little ranch. And of course, if you need help, then you call on the crew, and otherwise you take care of it. Spring and fall, of course, you have the crew coming in to help do all the cow works. But anyway, in those days, we didn't have a horse trailer. I did have a stake bed pickup with stock racks on it. So if you had to, you could load your horse you could jump him in the back of the truck with these stock racks, and you could drive to wherever you had to go and jump him out and prowl. But most all of it was horseback, and we did have a bobtail truck where you could carry 10 or 12, 15 horses maybe, I don't remember. But we could get a bunch of horses, in and out of that country that way. But most of it, you just rode, and sometimes you'd ride 2 horses a day. Sometimes you might ride one and lead one if you had a long ways to go before you really started your work. But that was about, I don't recall, it was about maybe 25 miles from town, but the road was down this Carasoso Creek bottom, and it took about 2 hours to go that 25 miles in the truck, to get to town. It took at least an hour and a half to get there, it seemed like. It might have been more than that. It might have been 40 miles. I don't know. It was a long ways. But it was rough country. These old camps that I used to live in are gone now. I mean, literally torn down, gone. But, the age of pickups and trailers and what have you has made these old cow camps more obsolete. And, it's always been changing. This whole cowboy thing, it's been changing forever. I mean, 100 years ago, 120, 30 years ago, they were writing songs about the demise of the cowboy, and we're still around. A lot of it's the same. I mean, there's no doubt that the cowboys of old would recognize those of us today, but it's definitely different. And yeah, so I was at that time that pickups and trailers were coming in more, and the need to have these remote cow camps wasn't necessary anymore. They just drive in and out. So yeah, I was the last camp man at the Phoenix camp on the T.O. Ranch. That was a great camp. I loved that place. That was out there on kind of the east side of Tanaja, and again, northeastern New Mexico. There was some really cool things there on that ranch. Odd, kind of really interesting country, and just kind of different out there. There was the Moore camp that was my neighbor's, and that camp had running water. It had a little trough that ran through the corner of the kitchen, where literally spring water from outside would run through the corner of the kitchen in this little trough, and that was your running water. And there on that ranch, there were these two trees growing about 10 feet apart, and about 4 feet off the ground is a branch growing from one tree into the other. But I'll be darned if I can tell which tree it grows out of and which one it grows into. And it's like an H, you know. I mean, it's these two trees growing up, and then this branch is just straight across, level between these two trees. And you know, that branch is probably, well, even back then when I was there, it was probably 10 inches around. These are old trees. Just amazing. There's a big rock there, a big flat rock up on the side of Tanaja that guys, cowboys, I'm sure camp men and whoever, had gone to that rock and carved pictures into it. Pictures of bucking horses and cowboys riding bucking horses, and there's a great picture of a Model T Ford, and some names and initials, but it's not like graffiti. It's more like pictures, you know, that guys had drawn into it. Really, really cool stuff. I mean, it's a big old rock, you know. It's probably 15 foot across, just flat sandstone rock. But that was a neat country. It was unusual somehow. I mean, it was out there in those mesas and canyons and little box canyons and just slick rock waterfalls, and real interesting country. But yeah, I shut that camp down. I was the last man there at the Phoenix. I think I was the last man at the Van Houten on the WS too. A lot of those camps on the WS are gone now, and the same with the TO. The same with the CS and the UU Bar. There's a camp on the UU Bar ranch that Will James used to stay at. But there hadn't been a camp man up there in decades.
In the early 1980s, photographer Martin Schreiber spent 18 months traveling to working ranches in Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico, taking pictures of working cowboys. In 1982, Schreiber released a book of his cowboy photos titled Last of a Breed. A limited edition of the book featured a glossary of cowboy terms by Buck Ramsey, and the cowboys featured in the book included Joel Nelson, R.W. Hampton, Gary Morton, and a young Rod Taylor.
I remember one time on the TO ranch, when I was out there at the Phoenix, we pulled a wagon a year from the start on the north end and then came down to the south end, you know, and it wasn't pulling a wagon like the old days, but it was still fun, and it was kind of neat to go with the wagon for a couple of weeks and throw our teepees up. And by the time we got around to the Phoenix camp, that was the last place we branded. The boss, the owner of the ranch, he flew out in his helicopter and landed, right there in the yard of the camp. And he had a photographer with him, a fellow named Martin Schreiber. And Martin was doing a coffee table book, picture book of cowboys. So Martin was taking photographs, and we were branding calves, and all went well, and we got done at, I don't know, might have been early afternoon, 1 or 2 o'clock, I don't know, we got done. Jim says, Rod, let's go get some beer. I said, okay, let's go. He said, how far is it to the nearest bar? And I said, I don't know, it's probably 25 miles over here to Maxwell. He said, okay, let's go. So I head for the pickup, and Jim heads for the helicopter. And he says, no, come on, get in. Like, can we just fly over there? He said, is there someplace we can land? And I said, well, yeah, I guess we can land somewhere over there. Let's go. So we jump in the helicopter and we fly to Maxwell. We land. Maxwell's a tiny little old town anyway, it's just a wide place in the road. So we landed out there in some guy's milk cow trap, and I walk up to his door and knock on his door, and this old man, comes to the door, and his mouth is gaped open. And I say, would it be okay if we park our helicopter here in your yard for a few minutes? We just need to walk down the street here. He just kind of nodded his approval. So we walked down the road about less than a quarter of a mile to the bar, and by several cases of beer. There's a picture in that book. We as coming out of the bar, I think I'm holding a couple of cases of beer, and Martin took my picture, and I had a rather, sly smirk on my face. So then we're walking back up the road to the helicopter, and of course by now, all 50 of the residents of Maxwell are cruising up and down the highway, looking at the helicopter parked over there, wondering what the heck's going on. One of these young fellas, and he's got his little baby daughter with him, driving an old, I want to say, it was an old Chevy, but classic, nice car. And he pulled up beside us and said, hey, can I give you guys a ride in your chopper? I was like, yeah, man, sure. So we hop in, and he cruises down the road, and we get back in the helicopter and fly away back to camp with the beer for the crew.
In his 1936 book, Cowboy Lingo, Ramon F. Adams had this to say about cowboys and roping. On the range, they say that the cowboy did everything but eat with his rope. In the early days, it furnished the cowboy recreation by the roping of wildcats, mountain lions, wolves, and grizzlies. It was his custom to toss a loop at almost all available marks, and there was virtually nothing with hair, fur, or feathers to be found on the range that had not at some time succumbed to a deftly flung rope.
On the Philmont, I've worked on the Philmont now full-time for 34 years. And Philmont's got about 300 cows and 300 horses and 100 buffalo and 100 burros. The Boy Scouts ride all the horses and they pack the burros. The buffalo are they're I guess just mainly for the scouts to see. The cow herd's just a regular commercial cow herd. But anyhow, these buffalo, years ago, occasionally we would exchange bulls with some other people just to get, new genetics and new bloodline. And we needed to catch this 2-year-old bull. And the way they normally did it, and this had been 30 years ago, but they would dart them, tranquilize them, with a dart gun, and then go pick them up in the trailer. Well, the boss, he wanted this one specific 2-year-old bull and never could get close enough to dart him. He was just too wary. So never did get it done. And, I was young and reckless. And I said, well, I'll just rope him. And my boss and this other older fellow that worked at the ranch, they just kind of looked at me and smiled and said, yeah, right, And we would occasionally. We had in the past roped buffalo out of the back of the truck. Kind of like, what's that old movie that John Wayne was in? Hatari, when they're chasing the rhinoceros out there across the pampa or whatever. Yeah, we'd tie 2 ropes together and tie the end of one of them on the ball of the trailer hitch, and drive out there in the truck, and somebody'd stand in the back of the truck and you'd rope them that way. But no, I didn't want to do that. I was going to do it horseback. I said, no, if you guys will haze that buffalo, in the truck, just line him out. I'll rope him. And so, I did. I had a little paint horse, called him Pinto Bean, and he was a good horse, and I'd roped a lot of cattle on him, and so sure enough, we got this buffalo, hazed him, lined him out, and when I roped him, we were probably going about 30 miles an hour. roped him around the horns, and as soon as the rope came tight, we just kind of topped this little rise, and we were just fixing to start down the other side, and it would have been real bad for me. It would have been like Windy Bill, you would have seen my old saddle go drifting down the draw, I'm sure. But when the rope came tight, the buffalo stumbled and fell, and that's the only thing that saved my life, I'm sure.
In addition to his work as a cowboy and a musician, Rod Taylor has also tried his hand at acting. He has appeared in the movies The Missing and The High-Low Country, as well as TV shows, documentaries, and commercials.
They wanted to do this Toyota commercial with a cowboy to recite a poem. And this may have actually had something to do with Elko. I know that it was after Elko had started. So it may even go back to that kind of the beginnings of all of the whole cowboy poetry renaissance. I don't know. But Toyota wanted to do a commercial, so they had a casting agent that was doing a casting call in Taos. So my friend Mike Hearn, the musician, went to the casting call. I didn't know anything about it at all, but the people there asked Mike, said, yeah, that's great, Mike, but, do you know any other kind of real cowboys? And Mike was like, well, yeah, I do. So they called me to see if I would come and, read for this part. Well, I was up at camp. I was up at the cow camp, Bonita Cow Camp on the Philmont. So they got a hold of my wife, and they said, well, could you have Rod give me a call? Well, no, he's he's gone. Well, when can you have him give me a call? Well, I don't know, whenever he gets down from camp. Well, this evening? Well, no. Tomorrow? Well, I don't know, maybe. Well, when? I mean, well, I don't know. Whenever he comes down, I'll tell him to call you. I did. 2 or 3 days later, I came down, I called them, and they said, would you come over and read for this part? So, I thought, well, what the heck, I guess. So I did, and ended up getting the part for this Toyota commercial. So they took us out to Monument Valley, Utah. It was cool. That's John Ford country, So I had to recite this silly poem and then get in this little Toyota Corolla car and drive away. But that was kind of crazy too. I was mainly using my own wardrobe. I mean, I had my leggings and my boots and spurs and, my hat. Well, anyway, the night before the shoot, the director, the producer, some of the ad agency people, I don't know, there were 7 or 8 or 9 people in there, and then my wife, Patty, and I. And so the wardrobe gal, she takes a bandana and she puts it around my neck, a cotton red bandana, and puts it around my neck and says, yeah, you need this, you need to wear this bandana. So I resist, I'm not going for it. And I pull out my bandana out of my back pocket that I blow my nose in, and I say, bandanas is what cowboys blow their nose in. Cowboys wear a silk wild rag around their neck. Well, they went around the room, and, the director says, oh, no, that looks great. We love that. The producer, the ad agency people, just one right after the other. They're all like, oh, no, we love the bandana. And I'm like, no, this, Well, anyway, they asked Patty what she thought. And Patty said, I think he looks like Howdy Doody. So when she said that, they all said, okay, all right, take it off. Let's try something else. So then I wore a more proper wild rag for that little show. But then, so the next day, they take my wardrobe, my props, whatever, my spurs, my leggings, all my stuff, and they want to put it in the prop truck for that night to go out the next morning. And I'm not really going for that either. I'm like, no, I'll keep my stuff. No, put it all in here. It'll all be there, yada, yada. So, okay, I load everything up on their truck. So the next day, we get there to go do the shoot, and I get dressed, and I have no spurs. Well, now, these spurs that I had were Jerry Cates spurs. They're very nice spurs, worth a lot of money. And they just mysteriously were gone. I say, well, I need my spurs. Well, we can't find them. And the light is just right, and we need to shoot. And I said, nope. I need my spurs. They're like, no, you don't need your spurs. It's okay. Don't worry about your spurs. You don't need them for the shoot. It'll be fine. But we need to go ahead and do the shoot because everything's just right. I said, no, you guys don't understand. I'm not going to do anything until I get my spurs back. And they're like, oh, okay, where's the spurs? So sure enough, about 15, 20 minutes later, the spurs mysteriously showed up. And then I went to work, doing whatever it was I was supposed to do, recite this silly poem. But anyway.
Some poem it wasn't an actual cowboy poem.
Oh, no.
They had come up with.
No.
Or about the Toyota.
It was something. Yeah, it was about the Toyota. So I was drifting like a tumbleweed through the desert heat, when like a refreshing wind she swept me off my feet. She filled my heart with song, but now she's done me wrong. She shut me out by barely lifting a finger. Life's got its ups and downs, and ain't this a humdinger? And then I don't remember. Anyway, it was all about the car. Yeah. So then I get in the car, right? We're perched on top of this little butte, and I have to drive the car out of the frame, out of the picture frame. Well, the direction that the car is heading, I've got about maybe 30 feet, before I would drive off the edge of the world there, and just drive straight off down into an arroyo that's about 30 feet deep. So they put a plastic trash can right there where I'm supposed to stop, right? So the first time I do the poem, I get in the car, I try to drive off. Well, hell, I can't, the car doesn't move, and this is all action. We're rolling, right? And I get in, I've done everything. I get in, I put the car in drive, and I go to drive off, and it doesn't move. And they're like, "Hey, Rod, the emergency brake's on." Oh, okay. And so we tried again. The next time, I think I hit the trash can and knocked the trash can off into the abyss. It was just... But we finally got it done. It was all right.
I started today's episode with a poem from Texas poet and cowboy J.B. Allen. J.B. was one of the finest poets to come out of the cowboy tradition. Buck Ramsey called him the best living writer of traditional cowboy verse. J.B. was also a close friend of Rod Taylor's, and I asked Rod to reflect on their friendship.
J.B. and I became real good friends over the years. I think at first he was maybe a little skeptical. Maybe he was just a little suspicious. He just wanted to know what my deal was. So, one year like I say, we got to be pretty good friends. JB and Buck and I got to be pretty close as a result of Andy Wilkinson's Charlie Goodnight project. And I really think as a result of that is when I asked JB to come up and JB accepted to come up and see what Philmont and what our deal was all about. So yeah, he came up in I think the first time he came up was to help us take cows to the high country. So every spring or every summer we drive about 200 head of cows from about 6,500 feet up to about 9,000 feet. And it's a pretty good push, and through a lot of oak brush and timber and up a steep rocky trail and over this Fowler Pass and then down into Bonita Canyon. And it's a beautiful drive, but it's tough. So anyhow, JB came up for that and liked it, and every other year we take them on over another ridge and down into another canyon. So on those years when it's a 2-day drive, then we'll stay at the cow camp. And JB really loved it up there at Bonita Cow Camp. It's a beautiful old log cabin with a outhouse and a spring and kerosene lamps, and it's just fine. It's just beautiful, And JB liked it up there a lot. So yeah, he would come up a lot over the years. He came up every year for the cow drive, probably for 15 years or more, and would sometimes come up in the summer and ride around with me, spend the night up there. Sometimes he'd come in the fall and help us gather all that country. I remember early on one time when JB was first year or two was up there helping, and we were in some thick timber and we were trying to move these cows, and JB looked over at me and he said, "You know, Rod, this would be real pretty country if it wasn't for all these dang trees." But JB was a real dear friend, and he was a real interesting guy. I mean, with JB, it was black and white. There wasn't any gray area for him. But yet, JB was real open-minded about things. He oftentimes would surprise me with his point of view. Not at all what I would have expected from him, you know. And JB didn't care what mattered to JB was who you were, not what you looked like, I remember him one time he was at a gas station getting gas, and there was some young kid over there all tattooed up and had piercings and what have you. But JB'd go talk to him. Didn't make any difference, you know. I mean, my hair's kind of long, and I think that was maybe one of the things that JB was kind of looked at me a bit sideways over it in the beginning and wanted to know what the deal was. But, you know, he'd go. He didn't have these preconceived notions, you know, or if he did, he did a good job of putting that away, and he would get to know you. I remember one time we were sitting at the kitchen table, JB and Margaret, Patty and I were sitting there, and Mason came in, my oldest son, and Mason started talking about tattoos that he wanted to get a tattoo. Well, Patty and I were just mortified, you know, that Mason would be talking about getting a tattoo in front of JB and Margaret. You know, and I wasn't a big fan of it anyway. So I was, you know, saying, "Oh, you don't need a dang tattoo. What in the world do you want a tattoo for? Yada, yada." And JB, he looks at me and he says, "Well, Rod, there ain't nothing wrong with tattoos." And I thought, I can't believe that JB Allen is sitting here and he just said, "Well, Rod, there ain't nothing wrong with tattoos." It just shocked me, you know. Of course, then he rolls up his sleeve and he's got a tattoo of an anchor and a battleship on his arm. You know, he was in the Navy. Yeah, he real interesting guy. I loved to visit with JB. He was a real confidant for me, and I sought his wisdom often. He just had a real quiet way that was sensible, but he could look at things from all the various perspectives, seems like. Of course, JB also, he would argue with you about things. A lot of times just for sport, you know, not necessarily for any other reason than just to argue, just for the heck of it. He'd do that too. He was good at that. He'd say, "Yeah, that ball was blue," and JB'd say, "No, it's not, it's round." It's like, what? I loved his poetry. To me, his poetry had a sparseness about it. And I liked that it had this openness to it somehow. But he wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of poems, you know, most of which aren't published. But he's got some just wonderful, wonderful stuff. His funeral was really something. Margaret told us that we all had to wear our hats. JB lined it all out for Margaret, you know, when he was in the hospital. He told Margaret how it was going to be and what they were going to do, what we were going to do. And JB, if he asked me once, he asked me 50 times to play Roundup in Spring. And I said, JB, I don't do Roundup in the Spring. Well, won't you do that song? That's a good song. Well, yeah, it's a good song, but every cowboy singer in the world does Roundup in the Spring, so I don't. Well, that's because they've all got more sense than you do. You know? Like, okay. So anyway, he'd always ask me. I mean, and he knew I didn't do it, but he'd ask me anyway, just because that's the way he was. So on his deathbed, he told Margaret, he said, Margaret, I want Rod to do Roundup in Spring at my funeral. And I did. Not a real good job, but I did. So I was looking through this book of, what is it called? You would know, Cowboy Songs and Other Western Ballads, is that right?
Cowboy Songs and Frontier Ballads.
Frontier Ballads, yeah. Is that the John Lomax or is that the, yeah? So I was looking through that book and I found these lyrics called the Pecos Puncher. And it's just lyrics, there's no music. And the little preface in there said that an anonymous person had sent these lyrics to John Lomax, but it didn't have a date as to when they came. And the edition of the book that I had was a second edition, so I don't know if this song was in the first edition. But it had to have been written sometime between the late 1880s and the early, well, sometime during the teens. So it was written sometime during that time period. And whoever just, you know, anonymous, these lyrics show up and it's just lyrics, no words or no music. So I thought it was cool. I liked the lyrics. So I made up a tune. So yeah, the lyrics could have been from the 19th century, and the music was from the. Yeah, I guess I wrote it. I guess I did the music probably in the 90s, maybe. Anyway. I am a gay puncher, fresh from the Pecos flat. Well, I wear the high heels, also the white hat. Ride the Myers saddle and my chaps are the best. My bits, boots, and spurs can't be beat in the West. Well, I'm noted in Texas, out on the State Plains, also from the Pecos to the Rio Grande Range. I'd ride up the trail, take down the rawhide, and there never was a bronco but what I could ride. I ride in the wagon, I ride in pursuit, to hear the cook holler, chuck away, grab a root. Roll out our beds on the ground, cold and hard, for shortly we have to stand 3 hours guard. Next morning at daybreak, in a circle we ride. We round up the dogies, take down the rawhide,
mark them and brand them like in days of old. On the left shoulder we stand, the 8-0. I ride for the mountains, also the long S. But as for the 8-0s, I think them the best. Nights are so dark you can hardly see it all, so we ride to the sound of some Mavericks ball. Now as for Mavericks stealing, I confess true enough, but to the young cowman seems mighty tough. But what cares a puncher as he rides a range? Old cowman will get there or else make a roll. Now as for bronc riding, I've got quite enough. I'll go east like Wild Bill and there play the tough. Let my beard grow long and I'll dance upon the stage. I'll tell they eat cactus out west and chew sage. As for saddle and bridle, well, I have no more use. Well, I ride to the home ranch, turn my bronc loose, but I'll hang up my saddle where it will keep dry, for I may by and by. In the sweet by and by.
I love that. Thanks for playing that for me.
Sure.
Thanks for taking the time to share some stories too.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. I'm honored that you would even ask.
All right, folks, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Rod Taylor for taking the time to visit with me. You can find out more about Rod at rodtaylormusic.net. You can also find out more about his band, The Rifters, at rifters.net. You can find out more about me and this show at andyhedges.com. If you're enjoying this show and would like to help support it, you can leave a donation on my website. You could also leave a rating and a review on the iTunes store, or you could just take the time to tell a friend about the show. If you'd like to contact me with a question or a comment or a story, I'd love to hear from you. Send an email to andy@andyhedges.com. Thank you for listening to Cowboy Crossroads.